It all started when the library decided to renovate the old book depository. At first, I didn't think much of it. Julia and I had lived a comfortable, predictable life for 12 years, nothing special, nothing out of the ordinary. We had our morning coffee together, watched our shows on TV, and spent our weekends fixing up things around the house. There was a sense of stability in the routine, a calmness we both enjoyed. But when they opened the new cafe in the old depository, everything changed. At first, it was just a place for her to escape for a few minutes during her lunch breaks. But over time, I started noticing little things. Julia started spending more and more of her time at the Teaspoon Café, as she called it, telling me she had to check out the new arrivals of books, though she'd never been much of a reader. The first time she mentioned it, I didn't think much of it. She was always looking for new hobbies, new things to try. But then it became a routine. She'd tell me she was staying late to look at some new arrivals, and I didn't think much of it. After all, it was just a cafe. It wasn't like she was doing anything wrong. But soon, I started noticing the small things. She stopped leaving me the notes in the kitchen that she used to write, the ones that always brightened my day. And then, she started wearing earrings on normal days, when we were just hanging around at home. Julia wasn't a big jewelry person before, so it caught me off guard. One day, I forgot my lunch and decided to surprise her at the library. I walked in, expecting to find her in the archive section, buried in old books like she'd said. But when I asked the librarian, she told me Julia wasn't there at all. She had been coming to the Teaspoon Café every day during her lunch break and sometimes staying afterward. She was never in the archive at all, not anymore. I felt a little uneasy, but I pushed the feeling aside. Maybe she just needed something different, something new to spark her interest. It didn't mean anything, right? I walked into the cafe, unsure of what to expect. And there she was, sitting on one of those soft, oversized sofas near the window, her head thrown back in laughter. Her eyes were sparkling, and she was smiling in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. She looked happy. Opposite her sat a young man with fiery red hair, reading aloud to her a passage from Alice in Wonderland. I had never seen him before. And on the table between them were 2 cups of lavender latte, her favorite drink, the one she always refused to order when we went out because she said it was too sweet. But there they were, 2 steaming cups of it, sitting in front of her. I didn't know what to think. My mind raced as I tried to process what I was seeing. Julia, the woman I had spent 12 years with, had been hiding something from me. She had been hiding this. I stayed for a moment, watching them, trying to understand. She didn't notice me at first, lost in whatever world she was sharing with him. The laughter was genuine. Too genuine. And that's when I realized she wasn't just spending time there. She was enjoying it. More than she enjoyed our life. More than she ever enjoyed being with me. I turned away and walked out before they saw me, before I said anything I'd regret. But I couldn't forget what I had seen. And I knew that this wasn't just about a cafe. Something bigger was happening. The next day, I couldn't shake the image of Julia and that guy out of my mind. I kept replaying the moment over and over, trying to make sense of it, but it only confused me more. The laugh, the way her eyes sparkled, the fact that she was so comfortable with someone I'd never seen before, it all felt like a punch in the gut. I spent the night tossing and turning, trying to think of what I could say to her, but nothing seemed right. I wasn't angry. I didn't know what I was feeling. I just needed to understand. I couldn't let this go without knowing the truth. So, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I went to the cafe before she got there. I figured if I got there early enough, I could observe without her knowing I was there. Maybe it would help me make sense of what was happening between them. I arrived just as the cafe started to fill up, ordered the same drink I had seen her with the day before, a lavender latte, and sat at a table near the window, facing the door. I felt like an outsider in that space, like I was intruding, but at the same time, I had to know. I watched the door every time it opened, waiting for her to walk in. My heart was pounding in my chest as I anxiously looked around. I tried to calm myself, to remind myself that I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just trying to understand. And then, finally, she walked in. Her familiar smile softened my nerves for a second, but it quickly faded when her eyes met mine. She froze for a moment, her hand still on the door handle, as if she hadn't expected to see me there. I saw the color drain from her face, and I knew. She had been caught. She looked so startled, so guilty, that I couldn't help but wonder just how long this had been going on. The man sitting across from her, Oliver, as I later learned his name to be, looked at me, clearly confused. But, despite the awkwardness of the situation, he extended his hand to me with a smile, completely unaware of the tension in the air. "You must be the man who always leaves her lilies in the car," he said, his voice light, almost cheerful. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at Julia, trying to gauge her reaction. She didn't speak. She didn't try to explain herself. Her eyes were lowered, and her lips parted, as if she wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. I could see the regret in her eyes, but there was something else there too. Something I couldn't place. I finally broke the silence, my voice quieter than I intended. "You know, Julia, I'm not angry. I just want to know what was missing." The question hung in the air, heavy with all the unspoken emotions I had been carrying for the past few weeks. For a long moment, Julia didn't say anything. She just stared at me, her face pale. It was as if she was searching for the right words, or maybe she just didn't know how to explain herself. Then, in a soft whisper, barely audible over the noise of the cafe, she finally spoke. "The feeling of being alive." Those words stung more than I thought they would. In that moment, it hit me. She hadn't left me because of some mistake or some flaw in our relationship. She hadn't strayed because of anything I had done wrong. She had left because she felt like she was just existing. Our life, our routine, had become too predictable, too safe. She had been searching for something more, something that made her feel like she was actually living, like she mattered. And Oliver, with his fiery hair and youthful energy, had given her that. I sat there in stunned silence, my mind racing. What could I say to that? How could I argue with her when she had just spoken the truth? I had been so caught up in our routine, so comfortable in the life we had built together, that I hadn't noticed she was suffocating in it. I hadn't seen the cracks forming, the way she was slipping away from me, piece by piece. And then I did something I hadn't planned. I silently got up from the table and left, not looking back. I didn't know what to say, what to do, but I knew I couldn't stay there with her anymore. Not now. Not like this. The night was quiet when I returned home. The silence was suffocating, almost unbearable. Julia wasn't there. Of course, she hadn't been home in days, and now it seemed like she wasn't going to be for a while. The apartment felt too big, too empty without her. I didn't know what to do with myself. I couldn't sit still, couldn't focus on anything. All I could think about was her words, her whisper, the feeling of being alive. The truth of it settled like a weight in my chest, heavy and suffocating. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know what was broken in the first place. For hours, I paced around the apartment, staring at things that no longer felt familiar. The coffee mugs we used every morning, the framed picture of us on our wedding day, it all felt distant, like I was looking at someone else's life. I thought about the small changes I had noticed in Julia lately, the way she had become more distant, the way she had started wearing earrings on ordinary days, the absence of notes in the kitchen. I thought about the way she looked when I caught her at the cafe, how happy she seemed, how alive she looked with Oliver. It was as if she had found something there that I couldn't give her, something I hadn't even known she was missing. I tried to distract myself by cleaning, something I used to do when I was anxious, but it didn't help. The simple act of washing the dishes, wiping down the counters, seemed pointless. Julia wasn't there to enjoy it with me. She wasn't there to share the small moments that had once defined our lives together. I realized that the life we had was nothing more than a collection of routines, habits that kept us busy but didn't bring us any closer. We had settled into a comfortable pattern, but somewhere along the way, we had lost the spark that had made us fall in love in the first place. And I wasn't sure how to get it back. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit around and wait for her to come back, for her to realize that she had made a mistake. So, I decided to go to the cafe again. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for, but something inside me told me I needed to go. I didn't want to face her, but I had to. I needed closure. I needed to understand what had happened. I got there early, before Julia arrived, and sat down at the same table by the window. I ordered the same lavender latte she had shared with Oliver the day before, even though I didn't really want it. It felt like I was trying to reclaim something, some piece of her that had slipped away from me without warning. I waited. When Julia finally walked in, she didn't notice me at first. She was talking to Oliver, laughing about something I couldn't hear. But when she saw me, her face fell. The smile faded, and she froze, just like she had the day before. I could see the panic in her eyes, the guilt that she hadn't been able to hide. She looked at me for a long moment, as if weighing whether she should approach me or just walk away. I didn't move. I didn't want her to think that I was angry, that I was waiting for her to explain herself. But I needed answers, and I wasn't going to leave until I got them. Oliver, seemingly oblivious to the tension between us, greeted me with a smile and held out his hand. "Hey, "You must be the man who always leaves her lilies in the car," he said casually. It was like he hadn't realized that there was something deeper going on, something more complicated than just a friendship between him and Julia. I didn't shake his hand. I just looked at Julia, and for a moment, I couldn't say anything. The words were stuck in my throat. What was there to say? How could I put into words the emptiness I felt? Julia's eyes were wide, her lips trembling slightly as she tried to speak. But she couldn't. She didn't know what to say either. I took a deep breath, my voice steady but quiet. "You know, Julia, I'm not angry. I just want to know what was missing." It wasn't an accusation, not exactly. I wasn't looking to blame her. I just needed to understand what had happened. She looked at me for a long time, her gaze unreadable. Finally, she whispered, almost too softly to hear, "The feeling of being alive." The words hit me like a punch in the chest. I had suspected it for a while, but hearing her say it out loud made it real. It wasn't about us not being good enough, or me not loving her. It was about the way our life had become stagnant. She had been searching for something that made her feel more than just the woman who made coffee in the morning and watched TV at night. She wanted to feel alive again, and I hadn't known that until it was too late. I didn't know what to say after that. I wanted to argue, to tell her that we could fix things, that we could go back to the way we were. But I knew, deep down, that it was too late for that. So, I just stood up, silently, and walked away. I didn't look back. The next few days passed in a haze. I barely slept, and when I did, I found myself tossing and turning, unable to quiet the storm of thoughts racing through my head. Julia had been a ghost in our apartment, there physically, but emotionally distant. She no longer made small talk over dinner, no longer asked how my day had been. The distance between us had become unbearable, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to face the truth that she wasn't coming back to the life we had once shared, and even if she did, it wouldn't be the same. I could feel it in the way she looked at me, in the way her eyes would wander when she thought I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't the one who made her feel alive anymore. I wasn't the one who excited her, who made her heart race. I could see it in the way she talked about the cafe, about Oliver, as though they had become the centerpiece of her world. I couldn't compete with that, and I realized that I shouldn't have to. The decision to leave wasn't something I made overnight. It wasn't a rash, angry choice. It was something that had been building slowly, piece by piece, over the past few weeks. I had spent years in this apartment with Julia, believing that our love, our routine, was enough. But now, I could see that it wasn't. Not for her. I didn't know when it had started. Maybe it had always been this way. Maybe I had just been blind to it. But Julia had outgrown the life we had built, and I wasn't sure how to fit into the person she had become. So, I did what I thought I had to do. I packed my things. I spent the entire afternoon going through our apartment, carefully sorting through the things that were once ours, our furniture, our pictures, the little mementos we had picked up on trips, all of it. I took my time, making sure I didn't leave anything behind that would tie me to this place. The idea of staying here without her was unbearable, and I knew I needed to leave for my own sanity. It wasn't just about the physical space, it was about the life that had been lived here, a life that was no longer mine. The thought of continuing in the same place, waking up in the same bed, walking through the same rooms, was suffocating. By the time evening came, I had packed everything I needed. I took one last look around the apartment, at the familiar spaces that had once felt so full of life, and I realized that I had outgrown them too. The love we shared, the life we built, was nothing more than a memory now. I left my keys on the kitchen table, right where we had always left them. A final gesture, a symbolic goodbye. When I walked out the door, I didn't look back. The weight of it all, the finality, the loss, settled in my chest, but there was something else there too. A feeling I hadn't expected. Relief. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. The suffocating weight of our stale routine had been lifted, and while it hurt, it also felt like a new beginning, a chance for me to find my own way. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be simple, but I knew I had to do it for myself. A week passed. Julia didn't reach out to me. I didn't reach out to her. I guess we both knew it was over, but neither of us could bring ourselves to say the words. And then, I heard the news. The Teaspoon Café, the place that had been the center of Julia's world for the past few months, was suddenly closed. No one knew exactly why. It wasn't the kind of place that just shut down without notice. The rumors started circulating that Oliver, the young man with the fiery hair, had disappeared. Some people said he had left town for a new music festival in Brazil. Others said he had just gotten bored with the cafe and moved on. The truth was never fully clear, but the cafe closed its doors without any warning, leaving Julia with nothing but an hourglass and a note. The note was simple, short. I had a good time, but I'm not for places where you stay forever. It wasn't a love letter. It wasn't a declaration. It was just a goodbye. The kind of goodbye that you leave when you know it's time to move on, to leave everything behind and start fresh. The kind of goodbye Julia had never gotten from me. The kind of goodbye I should have given her a long time ago. So, there she was, alone again. Back at the library, in the same place where she had found something that made her feel alive. But it was gone now. The cafe was gone, and Oliver was gone. She was left with nothing but the lingering scent of lavender lattes and a sense of emptiness that was all too familiar. The days that followed Oliver's sudden departure from the cafe were quiet, too quiet. The library was still there, unchanged. The books, the smell of old paper, the sound of footsteps echoing through the aisles. It was all the same, but it wasn't the same for Julia. She would show up there every day, just like she had before, but now there was a heaviness to her steps, a weight to her presence. The excitement that had once filled her when she talked about the new arrivals, the little adventures she had during her breaks, had vanished. I saw her, a few times from a distance, sitting by the window in the library, looking out at nothing. She was lost in thought, staring into the void, as if she were waiting for something that would never come. I wasn't sure if she was waiting for Oliver to come back, or if she was waiting for something bigger, something more significant. Either way, I knew she was waiting for something to change, but no matter how long she waited, she couldn't go back. She couldn't undo what had been done. I couldn't help but wonder what she was thinking. Was she regretting her choices? Was she feeling the same emptiness that I had felt when I realized she was slipping away from me? Or was she simply resigned to the fact that her journey with Oliver had ended, and now she had to face the consequences of her own search for meaning? I didn't know. I couldn't ask her. She hadn't reached out to me, and I hadn't reached out to her. In some strange way, we had both accepted that our time together had run its course, that we were two people who had outgrown each other, who were no longer a part of each other's lives in the way we once were. I had moved on, in my own way. I found myself rediscovering parts of myself that I had long neglected, parts of my life that had been overshadowed by the comfort of routine. I took up old hobbies I had abandoned years ago, traveled to places I had always wanted to visit, and started conversations with strangers. It was freeing, in a way, to step into the world again, to be fully present in my own life. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was living it, not just going through the motions. As for Julia, I could see she was still in the library, still wandering through the same aisles of books, still searching for something that might fill the void inside her. I wasn't sure if she would find it, or if she would ever be able to get back to who she was before the cafe, before Oliver. She had changed. We had both changed. And maybe, just maybe, we were both better off for it. A few weeks passed before I heard anything about Julia again. I was walking down the street when I spotted her, walking alone, her face lost in thought. She was holding a cup of coffee, but it wasn't a lavender latte. I had no idea what it was, but it seemed like she was trying to move on from the old version of herself, from the memories of the cafe and Oliver. She looked different now, like she had finally let go of the past, even if it was only just a little. There was a small smile on her face, a quiet acceptance in her eyes. She didn't see me, but I watched her for a moment, wondering if she was finally finding her way back to herself. I thought about approaching her, talking to her, but I stopped myself. We had both made our choices, and maybe it was time to let go completely. I wasn't sure what kind of conversation we could have now, what words could bridge the gap that had formed between us. The life we had once shared, the routine that had defined us, was no longer enough. And while we had both searched for something more, we had found different paths. I realized, as I stood there watching her walk away, that sometimes people just grow apart. Sometimes, you reach a point where the love you once shared isn't enough to keep you tethered to one another. And that's okay. I left the street, my hands in my pockets, and walked away, just like I had before. Only this time, there was no regret, no bitterness, just an understanding that the story was over, that we had both played our parts, and it was time to move forward. In the end, we had found what we were looking for, even if it wasn't the way we expected. And maybe that's how life works. Sometimes you have to lose something to realize what really matters. Sometimes you have to let go of the past in order to step into the future.